Sleepwalkers who kill. Is it just a clever legal defense? Is it even a decent legal defense? Is there a lot more to this? That's what we're talking about on today's BrainScratch. Hey everyone, it's me, John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today, March 2nd, 2018. Let's go ahead and get started with an article from the LA Times. This was published January 20th of 2017. And here we see a picture of Christopher Ireland. Christopher Ken Ireland, 37, was charged this month with 2 counts of special circumstances murder, 1 felony count of arson of an inhabited property, and 1 felony count of aggravated mayhem. Authorities said Ireland had been at a party on New Year's Eve at the home of Yolanda Holtray, 59. Prosecutors allege that around 1:20 a.m. New Year's Day, with his family waiting outside the home, Ireland killed Holtray and her friend Michelle Luke, 49, of Huntington Beach, by hitting them with a, quote, sharp instrument. According to prosecutors, Ireland left and then returned around 3 a.m. to grab the women's bodies and put them in his vehicle. Authorities believe he then set fire to the house before dumping the bodies in a field near Bonita Canyon Drive and Ford Road in Newport Beach. Ireland, who authorities said was going to help Holtray sell her home, was linked to the slayings through neighborhood surveillance video. He was arrested January 2nd. If we jump over to OC Weekly, we continue with this story. A man may have been sleepwalking the night he allegedly killed 2 women, dumped their bodies in Newport Beach, and possibly set fire to the Westminster home of one victim to cover up the murders, according to the suspect's wife. Right off the bat, one of the main challenges that I have with believing that this might actually be a real case of a sleepwalking murder is not only do we have this big time gap, we have to assume that he fell asleep or went subconscious or unconscious, I don't know what's more appropriate, at some point while he was at this party before 1:20, committed these crimes. Did he then wake up at 3 a.m. and remember that he had done that? Or was he still sleepwalking when he decided to line the trunk of his car with plastic, drive back out there, put the 2 bodies into his car, burn that house, and drive those bodies to a dump location and then get himself home? It seems like there's a lot of mechanics going on here. It's not quite the same as, I know on the channel we've talked about a previous instance where someone had mentioned to me that they got up and made a full meal while they were sleeping, or someone else that had driven a car to a familiar location. Yes, he was selling this woman's house, but would he be that familiar that it would be just kind of set in his mind that deeply that he could run on autopilot essentially and drive himself to that location and then do all of this stuff? I really don't know, but let's continue with the details here. Samantha Ireland worked with the women at Stein Mart in Huntington Beach and is the wife of the man accused of killing them. The 37-year-old suspect was licensed as a real estate agent. He was helping Holtray sell her Westminster home. Quote, "I don't know any realtors that would kill their clients," Samantha Ireland reportedly told NBCLA. "That's stupid. Why would he do that?" The suspect's wife added that she and her husband attended a New Year's Eve party at Holtray's home and had a good time. There were no fights, no arguments, she said, adding that after the couple left the party and returned to their Huntington Beach home, she did not recall Christopher leaving again afterward. "He doesn't remember anything," Samantha said. Now, I haven't found a whole lot of references about this sleepwalking idea except for it coming from his wife. Quite honestly, I'm not even sure if his legal team is going to try to use this as a defense at this point. Unfortunately, the news for this case starts in January of 2017 and pretty much stops in January of 2017. However, I did manage to eke out a little bit of an update, which I'm going to save until the end of the episode for all of you. But I am wondering, is this just his wife trying to defend her husband? Or is there something else at play here that maybe his wife is not aware of? Maybe there's more of a relationship that he had with one or both of those women that she just was not privy to, something along those lines. I'm really not sure. Let's jump over to Wikipedia and learn a little more about homicidal sleepwalking. Yes, Wikipedia even has an entry on it. Also known as homicidal somnambulism or sleepwalking murder is the act of killing someone during an episode of sleepwalking. And I've looked into a bunch of these cases when I was researching this episode. First of all, I notice a trend where it seems to most frequently, if not just about all the time, be a man that's doing it. And there's kind of the basic story, or the story that I see most often is a couple are in bed and the man kills his wife or possibly his mistress, someone that is sleeping right next to him. So in those cases, it certainly seems more believable, more feasible that could happen. When you start throwing in, all this travel, and it just seems like premeditation to me, particularly when you're taking plastic and lining the trunk of your car. I don't know. It gets a little tougher for me to buy into. According to Wikipedia, about 68 cases have been reported up to the year 2005, and they do have a list of some notable cases here. One of these notable cases we're going to get into quite a bit further on this video. But you might want to check out the Wikipedia. Definitely some interesting reading there. Now, there is a legal definition that also comes out that is kind of related to this, and that is automatism. That can be seen as variously as lack of voluntariness, lack of culpability, or excuse. It means that the defendant was not aware of his or her actions when making the particular movements that constituted the illegal act. And that really kind of sets my mind in motion about just thinking about the possibility of you being the person. Put yourself in these shoes. Think about maybe you have some type of issues with sleeping. Maybe you've been known to sleepwalk previously. Maybe it runs in your family. And you wake up and the person next to you has been killed and there is a knife in the bed and there's blood all over you. I think it's terrifying. There have been several movies that have kind of been written around this, but I think that for me personally, there's something about doing something when you don't have all your faculties that really, really scares me. That you don't have the chance for a moment to think about what you're doing and say, whoa, no, that's not something that I want to do, because you're really not awake. I mean, there's parts of your brain that are literally not functional when this is going on. It's really kind of a freaky thing if you put yourself from that perspective and really consider it. Let's move forward to health.usnews.com. This is a little bit of a compilation, 7 criminal cases that invoked the sleepwalking defense. So now we're kind of hitting it more on the legal side. And I just wanted to show you, first of all, how far back this goes. Massachusetts versus Terrell was back in 1846. And this case is thought to be the first U.S. legal case in which the sleepwalking defense was mounted with success. So it actually worked in this case back in 1846. Fain versus the Commonwealth was in the 1870s. And once again, it worked. They had to go through an appeals process. They were initially convicted, but in the appeal, the conviction was reversed. State versus Bradley in the 1920s, same thing. Basically, the conviction in the initial trial, they went through an appeal process, and the conviction was reversed. Regina versus Parks, this is a case from 1987. This is one that we're going to talk about a bit more later in the video. Not guilty. Pennsylvania versus Rickskers. This is 1994. Now, here I think we start seeing a little bit of a trend. In 94, sentenced to life in prison without parole. So obviously the defense did not work there. Arizona versus Falater, that is in 1997, guilty of first-degree murder. California versus Reitz, 2001, convicted of first-degree murder. So if we were looking just at these 7 cases as kind of its own sample set, it would appear to me that this worked as a defense. It didn't work solid. I mean, you've got 2 of these that had to get to appeals before the conviction gets reversed. But it seemed to work as a defense up to the early 1900s. And it seems like, from 1990 forward, it's just not as solid. It seems like a lot more convictions going on there. And this is the man Kenneth Parks from that case in 1987. It's one of the more famous instances that gets discussed a lot because he drove to his in-laws' house that was about 14 miles away. He took a tire iron from their garage and he went up and attacked his mother-in-law. He then took a knife and he attacked both his mother-in-law and his father-in-law. Unfortunately, I think he stabbed her 6 times. One of those punctured her heart and she died. The father-in-law lived. But you get this very interesting twist with this case, particularly when they come to use the defense. This is a video from World Science Festival, and we'll just see a little bit of what they're talking about here.
He was always known to be a very, very deep sleeper. He also had an incredible family history of sleepwalking. 20 first-degree and second-degree family relatives had parasomnias. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And covering 4 different parasomnias: sleepwalking, sleep terror, sleep talking, and also sleep-related eating disorders. So he had an incredible family history.
So that, I think, would certainly help a legal defense if you have that type of family history, but also speaks to the reality of this type of disorder. This is a man that actually got along with his in-laws very well. His wife didn't particularly get along with her own parents when they met, and he helped bridge the gap for all of them to kind of get reconnected and get back together. According to the guy that's speaking in this video, he really didn't have any reason. There is no motive for him to kill these people. And unfortunately, it did affect his marriage, as you imagine it might. His wife did wind up leaving him. Jumping to another article at LA Times, Toronto, a man was acquitted of murdering his mother-in-law after saying he was sleepwalking when he drove 15 miles to her house and hit her with an iron bar and repeatedly stabbed her. An Ontario Supreme Court jury deliberated 9 hours before finding Kenneth Parks of nearby Pickering not guilty. Defense lawyer Marlise Edwards said that on the night of the killing, Parks plunged into a deep, deep sleep. His next memory is seeing his mother-in-law's face. The lawyer said that when Parks regained consciousness, blood dripping from his severely cut hands, he drove to a nearby police station and told officers, "My God, I've just killed 2 people." Prosecutors called the defense simply ludicrous, but of course we know the outcome. It did actually work. And another interesting part of this story is when he got to the police station, they noticed that he had cut the tendons in his hand with the knife as he was stabbing his mother-in-law, but he didn't seem to be in any pain from that. They were pretty sure that something very strange was going on just by the way that he was handling himself when he did get to the police station. So that might have helped his defense as well. Jumping over to Chicago Tribune, Justice David Watt of the Supreme Court of Ontario, citing a jury's decision last month to acquit Parks on a reduced charge of second-degree murder in connection with the death of his mother-in-law, has formally dismissed charges that he also had attempted to murder his father-in-law. So I guess they don't have a double jeopardy law like we do in the States here. They tried to try this case again with a reduced charge, second-degree murder, and of course for the attack on his father-in-law, and this defense still held up there, and basically he got off on those as well. What I'm curious about is when I think of second-degree murder, I think that's a charge that frequently comes up with drunk driving accidents, and I'm kind of trying to line that up in my head. I guess it's different in this case because we don't know that he took any actions that made his case worse. Like, we're going to talk about a case later where someone's taking medication, and that might kind of change things both morally and legally. But in this case, we don't have any information that he did anything to take his current condition and actually exacerbate it in any way. So I'm not sure that the second-degree murder charge would really be appropriate in that case. But I do think of, with drunk driving, people can drink to the point where they are obviously not aware that they are doing, but that is a set of actions that they've taken. There are many options that they have during that time before where they can do the right thing and decide to get a ride, or so it does seem quite a bit different to me, but I don't know. I still kind of struggle with it in terms of, is there really a layer of responsibility to the person there or not? And here at abc11.com, we hear about Joseph Mitchell. This is a story just from March of 2015. A jury found 50-year-old Joseph Mitchell not guilty of first-degree murder in what was called the Sleepwalking murder trial. He was also found not guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder. Mitchell claimed he was sleepwalking when he smothered his 4-year-old son and attacked, I believe they were his 2 other children, in September of 2010. And this is really tough. Even if you watch the video clip here, of course, I'll have links in the description box below for everything we're looking at today. If you watch the video clip here, you'll see his wife have this reaction in court. She is basically not happy that he doesn't get convicted for this. I mean, she has hyperventilating issues. They remove her on a gurney, basically, and get her out to an ambulance. There is such emotional knots when you look at these cases, because you've got family members, you have obviously the victims being affected, but then the family of the victims, and this is your own family member that is doing this. And do you really understand that this is something that they can control? And is this just a legal defense that they're using? Or is this something that's real and something they can't control? And should you still hold them accountable, kind of like in that previous case where his wife winds up leaving him? It's a real sticky thing in my mind, and I'm not sure that there is a solid answer to that. Jumping over to Psychology Today, let's get a little more information on this. If part of our brain, I think the word stays is missing from this. If parts of our brain stay awake while we sleep, we might undergo parasomnia behaviors. Sleepwalking, sleep eating, sexsomnia, or something more complex like sleep driving. As scientists come to understand that pharmaceuticals that induce sleep, like Ambien, Lunesta, and Sonata, can lead to people experiencing parasomnias, things become even more complex. I'm curious if we're going to see a case where they say, I want to sue Ambien or the company that makes Ambien because I didn't have these issues before I started taking that medication, and now I was sleep driving and I wrecked my car or I hurt someone or something along those lines. It does bring an interesting fold to this conversation where you think about drug interactions that could either be making pre-existing conditions worse or possibly as this is kind of alluding to, creating the condition where people might have not even experienced that before. And that leads us to this article at swordandscale.com. Man says cold tablets drove him to murder. September 1st, this is just in 2017, a bewildered Matthew James Phelps dialed 911 and told the dispatcher he believed he stabbed his wife to death. Lauren Ashley Nicole Phelps, 29, was rushed to Wake Med, but it was already too late. She was pronounced dead on arrival. And here they have a link to the 911 call. We're not going to listen to all of it, but I do want you to hear some of kind of how he's talking and obviously what he's saying here as well.
I had a dream, and then I turn on the lights and she's dead on the floor. How? I have blood all over me, and there's a bloody knife on the bed, and I think I did it.
So when I initially listened to that, his tone kind of seemed off to me. I mean, once again, I'm just trying to put myself in this person's shoes. You wake up and you see that your wife of actually less than a year in this case is in bed with you and she's dead, and there is a bloody knife and you have blood, as he says later in this tape, actually dried all over his hands. I would be pretty dang freaked out, but we have to consider that there is a medication that could be affecting him here. Phelps later admitted to investigators that he had taken more than the recommended amount of Coracidin cough and cold tablets that night. And he didn't say that he particularly took them because he had a cold. He said that he took more than the recommended amount because it made him feel good and it helped him with his insomnia. So it's a really hard call to listen to, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, just go to the Sword and Scale link down below, and the video clip is right in the middle of it. He does wind up getting very emotional towards the end, but it does strike me that about the first half of this call, he almost sounds like a robot. You almost wonder if he is even awake at that point, or if he might have just drugged himself so severely with this cough and cold medication that he's still kind of out of it. But definitely a terrible occurrence and just a horrible thing. And here is a picture of him and his wife. Fox News reports that prior to his arrest, Phelps had been an aspiring preacher, having studied missions and evangelism at Clear Creek Baptist Bible College. He was currently employed as a landscaper. Let's get some more details on this case, jumping over to nydailynews.com. An autopsy report revealed that 29-year-old Lauren Phelps was stabbed 123 times. Her husband, Matthew Phelps, was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder. Inside Edition has some good coverage on this. A really good video on this case up at the top, but also a good article below. Phelps, an aspiring pastor who'd been married less than a year, has since been charged with first-degree murder. He's pleaded not guilty. Following Lauren's death, the Bayer Corporation, which manufactures Coracidin, said, quote, "There's no evidence that Coracidin is associated with violent behavior. The medication, however, does list nightmares and severe hallucinations on its list of rare side effects. Numerous attorneys have used the, quote, Ambien defense in cases that range from DUI to murder. Ambien is a drug used to treat insomnia. Charlie Sane of North Carolina was accused of assaulting his wife and shooting at police after having 3 to 4 drinks and taking Ambien in January of 2014. He was initially charged with 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, but was acquitted in March of 2016 after using the, quote, Ambien defense. The defense doesn't always work, however. That same year, a Philadelphia nun, 41-year-old Kimberly Miller, claims she was sleep driving after drinking, quote, altar wine and taking Ambien. She claims she had no recollection of ever getting into her car. Nonetheless, she was later convicted of drunk driving. It is not clear whether Phelps had any other drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his wife's murder. Phelps's attorney, Joseph Blount Cheshire, has asked that the public withhold judgment on the case until more developments are made. Quote, "There's a lot to this story, I believe, that will be told in the future. Matthew's family and all of us at my firm really send our deep condolences to the family of the young lady who died and to her family. It's a very tragic situation, sad and tragic for both families." Definitely sad and tragic. Might be more sad and tragic for his wife's family, but then there's a little bit of more interesting information that comes out. This is from crimeonline.com. There is evil in my head, alleged cough medicine killer's social media life revealed. Inside Edition reports that Matthew Phelps had a secret online life. The 27-year-old aspiring pastor apparently used the screen name Marty Radical on Instagram and shared photos of himself wearing all black. "I can't get out of my bed. There is evil in my head. Just let me be," he captioned on one of his posts, quoting lyrics by rock band Korn. Phelps also used the social media site Tumblr, where he shared his experiences with difficulties getting to sleep. Ever since I was little, I had some strong activity with my dreams. Nightmares, night terrors, sleepwalking, hallucinations, and controlled dreams have all filled my life so far. Apparently, these social media accounts have been taken down, so I couldn't find them for myself. But I don't know. It's strange because there we're seeing some history of him having these types of issues, and he's pretty much admitting to a form of substance abuse when it comes to that cough and cold medication, and those two things together. Could they have led to him doing this while he was truly asleep? I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the court case comes out with that. Over at crimetraveler.org, they have done a little bit of a deep dive into this and have some information I want to share with you guys. The National Sleep Foundation reports that between 1% and 15% of the general population sleepwalk on a regular basis. What's more interesting is, according to a study carried out in France in 2013, 58% of 140 adult sleepwalkers studied displayed violent behavior during their sleep, with 31% of violent incidents being towards themselves and 46% toward their partner sleeping next to them. Now, I'd be really interested to know how they categorized what violent behavior was. Does that include just, screaming or yelling names at them, or are we talking actual physical swings or kicks of some kind? I'm really not certain, but it is still pretty interesting that there's a pretty substantial number in that sample set that is showing some type of behavior, maybe not necessarily this type of behavior. And what about the guy we started this episode with, Christopher Ken Ireland? Like I said, I tried to find news on him. Nothing outside of January 2017. I think there's a few articles just in the start of February about him having an upcoming court date. So I decided to go to the court's website and register there, and it cost me just a little bit of money to bring up the case detail here. But we can see that the counts are all here, 6 counts. We've got 1 count of murder. His plea is not guilty. And these pleas all happened on January 20th. The special circumstance, the plea says denied. I'm not quite sure what that means. I've looked into this special circumstance, and I think it's because there is more than one murder that's being committed at the same time, that's the special circumstance clause. So maybe he doesn't actually make a plea to that. We see the second one, which is for murder, section 187 of the Penal Code. And then we see arson of an inhabited structure or dwelling. He's saying he's not guilty. And we see aggravated mayhem, also saying he's not guilty. So I'm very curious to know if we're going to see this sleepwalking defense come up in this case as well, or if there's something else where he's just saying, it wasn't me. My wife says I didn't leave home that night. I didn't leave home. And he's going to leave it up to the prosecution to prove that, they found the sharp object, that they can prove that his DNA is on the sharp object, that, they found the plastic lining from the trunk of his car. I'm really curious about how these are not guilty pleas right off the bat if he's not using the sleepwalking defense, but we'll see. And we can see here, if we click on hearing info, that they have been having pretrial hearings. Only one of them has been canceled so far. Actually, interestingly, no, it was moved. It was moved to a different courtroom. So the last thing that happened was a preliminary hearing on January 16th of 2018. And the next thing to occur is on May 15th of 2018. They are going to continue their preliminary hearing. So I'm not sure how far we are from this case actually getting moving and some more media hopefully covering this. I'd be very surprised if they don't pick it back up, considering the coverage that it got when it initially happened. But you never know. I'm not sure. But we'll keep an eye on it. If I do find some more information, we'll be sure to let you know about it. This is where I turn it over to you, Brain Scratchers. Obviously, there are real medical conditions at play here. I don't know if all the cases that we're talking about today fit into the reality of those medical conditions. This last one is pretty tough when it comes to Mr. Ireland, for me, thinking about all the logistics, the period of time, This one just really seems kind of hard for me to swallow that this is a real sleepwalking event, but we haven't heard that is necessarily the defense that he's going to use. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But what do you guys think about all this? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of BrainScratch. I hope each and every one of you has a great weekend, and I hope each and every one of you will come back on Monday to the Lord and Arts channel. I'll see you there.